Me too. All right, Mr. Clerk. Yes, sir. All right, hereby call this special meeting of the Jackson City Council to order. We do have a quorum. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to say that we're thinking and praying for our colleague, Councilman Kenneth Stokes, and a former colleague, Rita Cooper Stokes, who understands she was in the hospital. And has anybody got any word about how she's doing? Okay, well, I just want to begin by saying that we have her in our prayers. All right, we'll go ahead and start in with item number 1. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Great morning to everybody, members of the council. This morning, members of the administration will present on 2 items. One is a public works matter that includes a briefing on the selection processes of both the consent decree program management and biosolids waste removal program. Both of these items, which are not optional programs for the city and are actually in fact key components of our ability to meet our Clean Water Act consent decree ordered regulatory compliance. It is our effort to give a transparent walkthrough of the selection process that gives explicit narrative about a procurement process with several components that create an overall selection. And let me be clear that this briefing is less about a particular proposer than it is about the administration's process to selection. You will notice that while proposers may be here, they are not here at the invitation of the mayor to be a part of this discussion, as this discussion is solely ours and will be presented based on proposals as presented to the evaluation committee at the time that all criterion was expected due. This is being presented to ensure that council is appropriately apprised of the decision-making process of the administration. Second is the issue of the general fund budget, with specific attention given to the fund balance. Over the past several days, there have been very specific accusations that the administration or the mayor, more specifically, has been dodging council questions concerning the budget, and this could not be further from the truth. As the council has been holding a series of meetings concerning the budget with specific focus on the enterprise fund for the last few months. Just over a week ago, I made a request for a briefing via special council meeting, as the mayor is permitted to call per council bylaws for the purpose which is stated in my opening remarks. I received notice that the meeting had been scheduled for May 9, 2016 at 10 a.m. This would pose a conflict for me, as I had a previously standing meeting with the Hines-Rankin Pearl River Flood Control Board in Rankin County. Considering the scope of the proposed briefing, there was no need for me to be present, as there was no action to be taken, and there would be more than capable staff presenting the information from members of council. On May 5th, 2016, at 11:31 a.m., staff received email notice from the Office of City Clerk that Council President Priester desired to have certain questions addressed pertaining to the general fund budget, with specific attention giving details to the fund balance. The questions submitted to the administration were as follows. Number 1, do we have a reserve deficiency for FY 14-15 and 15-16? Number 2, if so, how much? Number 3, if so, what's the plan for replenishing the reserve? Number 4, what's the current revenue in the general fund budget for FY 15-16? Number 5, what's the final general fund revenue for FY 14-15? Number 6, how do they compare to the budget? Number 7, what are our total general fund expenditures? Am I being turned down? Because I feel like I'm being turned. My voice is almost gone, so as much as I can get, it'll help me, please. How do they compare to the budget? Number 7, what are our total general fund expenditures for FY 15-16 through the end of the second quarter? Number 8, how do they compare to the current budget? Number 9, what's the fund balance for FY 15-16? Number 10, how much fund balance from the end of FY 14-15 did we plan to use to balance the budget for FY 15-16? All of these are very reasonable and frankly, very competent questions that should be asked by any legitimate legislative body given statutory oversight of the budget. What is not reasonable is to insist that there is no effort made by this administration to inform the council of budgetary information based solely on my unwillingness to change the scope of a meeting that I called to address another matter. As a matter of fact, in an email to Council President Priester dated May 6, 2016 at 7:37 p.m., I specifically asked, was this budget information being requested to take precedence over the original purpose of my request of this meeting? Then requested that there be a separate budget meeting scheduled to address these matters in order to give finance an opportunity to refocus from mounds of enterprise fund presentation preparation. As a former council person, I understand the necessity for good information in a timely fashion in order to optimize decision making. For this reason, the administration has extended a courtesy to the legislative body that has never been extended. That courtesy is an opportunity to access the city budget information by the city council's full-time policy analyst. This full-time analyst, as I understood the job description when I was a part of this council and helped draft that description, is to provide budget-specific information with analysis of the budget and to keep the part-time council apprised of any budgetary movements. In times preceding this administration, the courtesy to see council and mayoral staff integrated was not only non-existent, it was taboo. This council recently approved movement of funds from the fund balance to the insurance fund. There was a fund balance update to the best of our ability with limited information given at the movement of these funds. Fund balance concerns did not just arise, but were glaring at that approval request. Over the past several weeks, the interim director of finance has, through the financial advisor, the municipal advisor, extended the opportunity to have one-on-ones with council members to get input from council about the budget and to entertain any issues the council may have had. These were meetings initiated by the administration. Again, a courtesy not seen in recent administrations, or at least not since 2009 when I've been a part of this particular body. Council President recently had a meeting about the reserve fund and its impact with, or was rather apprised of the reserve fund and its impacts by Kipling Jones, the city's municipal advisor, where a memo dated May 2nd was shared and information in that memo. This meeting was initiated at my behest. Again, in an effort to keep the council through its leadership apprised. Over the past few months, the council has, through the power of committee, held a series of budget meetings. Budget meetings and all other council called agendas are set and administered, as we see, solely by the council. You see, ladies and gentlemen, the budget master is and always has been the city council. The budget is what makes this council strong. If the council sets the agenda, they have full scope of these matters. Last budget cycle, the administration put a budget before this body that was very unpopular. It addressed things that we knew would be challenging to both citizens, our internal processes, and the governing politics. Especially after having passed the FY 13-14 budget that included water, sewer rate increases that shocked us all, as well as millage increases. But we also knew that tough choices had to be made to stave off this present circumstance. The budget we presented is not the budget we are working with. The council president has said that he has requested certain information concerning fund balance. He is absolutely correct. However, the president was also asking a question or questions that we were at the time unable to accurately state on the record and in open forum, as there are certain disclosure concerns we had with stating potential inaccuracies from an incomplete audit. See, part of being ready to lead on day one is having the wisdom to know when and when not to place the city at risk. So today, Mr. President, we will address those questions posed by the council via the clerk's office that do not place the city in any further adverse situations. We will also ask the consultant hired by the city of Jackson to make recommendations going forward that council will be asked to deliberate and act on soon. With that being said, at this time, I'm going to ask if Michelle Day, Interim Director of Finance, would take us through those questions that were posed by Council President, and I'll ask that you be very, very careful about those items that are disclosure concerns at this time.
Michelle Day, Department of Administration. If we go through the list of questions, I'll read the questions and provide the responses thereafter. And you all have been passed out a memo that lays out all the questions. Do you have a reserve deficiency for FY 14-15 and FY 15-16? Yes. If so, how much? For FY 14-15, the current deficiency is $4,187,367. Our current projection for FY 16's deficiency is $7,150,044. Based on an ordinance approved by the City Council, the requirement for the unreserved fund balance in the general fund is 7.5% of the adopted revenue. The FY 14-15 adopted revenue budget was $122,378,560, of which 7.5% is $178,392 was required to be set aside as fund balance reserve. At the beginning of FY 14-15, the available fund balance, including the reserve, was $16,168,423. From this amount, the funds which represent the 7.5 of the adopted budget was the $9 million, as referenced above. The remaining funds, $6,990,031, were available to be used to balance the budget for FY 14-15. The adopted applied fund balance for FY 14-15 for the general fund, not including your sub-funds, was $14,799,187. Therefore, $7,809,156 of the required 7.5% was used to balance the budget. However, in FY 14-15 year end, the city only needed $11,177,398 to close the budget. This created the $4,187,367 deficit. I will now list the items that were drawn on the FY 14-15 fund balance reserve. We had a debt service payment of $1,234,206. We had an insurance payment of $424,809. We had a master lease for $116,500. We had a grant that was not sufficiently funded. The AmeriCorps grant, $858. A police DUI grant, $756,000. And as I described before, the FY 14-15 budget was balanced with using a portion of that fund balance reserve, and of that $2,410,238 was just absorbed in the overall adoption of the budget. So those amounts aren't easily identifiable when you look back at things. It was just, various departments' lines were increased, so we could not identify what that $2.4 million was. Question number 3 was, what is the city's plan for replenishing the reserve? The city's proposed financial plan includes the establishment of a budget stabilization fund, which will provide a mechanism by which funds which exceed budget needs, including the required fund balance, may be set aside. The city must redefine our core services. The provision of these core services should be our primary focus as we continue to rebuild our reserves. The city has historically provided services that extend beyond public safety, water and wastewater, and infrastructure management, including our streets and bridges. Our citizens have benefited tremendously from these services, but the cost of providing them has begun to drain the city of much-needed resources, which has affected our ability to provide the core services. The city must continue to explore, create, and implement additional revenue streams. For example, our parking meters, explore ways to monetize the city's assets, explore private management of certain city facilities. We will also place a priority on areas where the city generates revenue and aggressively pursue any uncollected revenue. The hiring of all non-essential personnel should be suspended. All non-emergency overtime and overtime not previously approved by the department director should be suspended. Requests for non-emergency purchases and travel should be suspended. We should reduce the funding provided to outside agencies until we have had an opportunity to rebuild our reserves. Discontinue the youth employment and summer enrichment programs until the city has had an opportunity to rebuild its reserves. The city must be proactive in its efforts to eliminate fraud and abuse of city resources. Question number 4. What's the current revenue in the general fund budget for FY 15-16? The current general fund revenue budget is $77,929,755. What's the final general fund revenue for FY 14-15? $109,575,976. How do they compare to the budget? The $77 million as of April 30th, 2016, the collections were at 67.9% of the budget. But I want to add that that number is a little skewed because we have received all of our property taxes and revenue that we would actually collect on. Those numbers are probably more in line with where we should be at this point. So when you look at that 67.9%, consider that the bulk of our property taxes have been received and is pushing that number up.
Do we know how we compare to this point last year?
Yes. So, let's see. Now, I didn't hand out the April reports to you. I gave you the quarterly reports. But it's April 30, 2016. So overall, year-to-date, as of this time last year, we were at 56.88% on our general fund revenue collection.
So is it accurate that our revenue is up for this year in terms of actual numbers?
That's what I'm saying. When you look at the 67.9%, I did give you a revenue report through March 30th because that was the end of the second quarter.
Sure.
If you look at that report, it'll show you the individual revenue lines that we collect on. So when you look at your property taxes at March 30th, let me see, I just called up the numbers for April. For April, our general property taxes was at 83 I'm sorry, 82.9%. So, like I said, we receive that at periodic times in the year, so those numbers will be up, which will skew the overall total. But ones that we actually license and permits, fees and fines and things like that, where we have to actually collect, those numbers are more at that 50% rate that it should be for this time of year. We do have some below. We're looking at those line items now to see where we need to adjust, based on whether or not we anticipate receiving those full amounts by the end of this fiscal year.
Mrs. James?
Thank you, Mr. President. This question really to the body. Do we still want to go forward with the budget meeting on Monday like we previously planned?
I think we need to, because that was about enterprise funds. So let's get through.
2 weeks ago, we had a budget committee meeting. We planned to have another one this coming Monday. I want to make sure that we're still planning for that so that we can.
That one's about enterprise fund. This is about general fund revenue. So let's see if we get enterprise fund.
Could the clerk please poll for Monday as previously planned and get the proper notifications out?
Okay. Number 6, how do they? Okay. The collections for FY 14-15 as of September 30th, they were at 99.6%. Number 7, what are our total general fund expenditures for FY 15-16 through the end of the second quarter? $56,055,253. How do they compare to the current budget? As of March 31st, 2016, expenses were 45.88% of the budget. Number 9, what's the fund balance for FY 15-16? At the end of FY 14-15, the available fund balance was $4,991,025. This amount was therefore the beginning fund balance for FY 15-16. Number 10.
Wait, hold on. Is that above the reserve, or are we just talking about, is that including the 7.5%?
The 4.9?
Yeah.
The 4.9 is the amount that you had, if you go back to the calculation on the front page.
All right.
So the 7.5% was the $9,178,392. The deficit is 4.1 million, the bottom number. That difference is 4.9. That's what you have left.
All right. So then we're not meeting your 7.5%.
No.
All right.
Number 10, how much fund balance from the end of fiscal year 14-15 did we plan to use to balance the budget for fiscal year 15-16? $907,627 was used to balance the FY16 budget. And for FY16, we as we did with FY 14-15, we've determined items that had a negative impact on the fund balance. And of that, we had a master lease for $476,793. Constituent services, when we were preparing the budget for FY 15-16, there was a position that was frozen in error, and we made an effort to restore that position, and that was $48,289. There was a donation to a community center for $20,000, and to fund a part-time position in one of the councilman's office for $7,676. And we tried to project through the end of the year items that we feel will have a negative impact on the remaining fund balance. And those items are, going through the analysis, and I think I mentioned to you all last week, where we had our second quarter meetings, we did a second round of meetings with departments that we felt like we would, come into potential issues with. And one of them, looking back month to month, has been the police department. As of May 4th, JPD has expended 91% of its overtime budget. And if they continue to spend at this rate, they will exceed their overtime budget by at least a minimum amount of $750,000. Also in that area, the community improvement But if they continue at the rate that they're going, they will exceed their budget by $98,417. As you know, the insurance fund was also not properly budgeted for FY 15-16. Current projections indicate that we will require approximately $1,841,912 to cover the shortfall. And when we're going through that process, it's no scientific way to perform that calculation. It's contingent on the number and severity of the medical claims that our employees create. We have J-Tran. They ordered 2 buses in fiscal year 14-15 that did not come in during that fiscal year. And during that time, the price increased on the buses by $272,000, and that difference will have to be covered by the city. The projected revenue budgets for FY 15 and 16 were adjusted based on actual collections to date and projections through the end of the fiscal year. The adjustments to the revenue budgets amounted to approximately $344,970. And I also want to just add as a footnote, just to keep in mind, you know, the reserve is a cumulus amount as we continue through the years. Any savings that we have, we put into that pot, but any things that are not budgeted come from that pot of money. And 2 big items that I noticed in fiscal years 13 and 14 were the HUD penalties that we had to pay. We paid $1,939,952 in FY 13 and $1,510,810 in FY 14. And these were 2 significant draws that have significantly decreased our fund balance in the previous years.
Okay, so let me make sure I've got the math right.
Mhm.
When we did the budget for 15-16, we had factored in having a 7.5% reserve of approximately $9 million.
No. When the FY 14-15 budget was presented for adoption in August 14. That budget was adopted using $14 million fund balance. Luckily for us, only 11 million of that 14 million was actually used to close out at the end of the year.
At the end of 15-16 and not.
No, at the end of 14-15. So when the budget was adopted for 14-15, they created your deficit. That was the initial deficit. We adopted a budget that, and looking back historically, the budgets had been adopted with the expectation that applied fund balance would be used to balance it. Now, we didn't necessarily use all of the applied fund balance, but in previous years, budgets have been adopted using that applied fund balance. And so when we started out October 1 of 14, we were in essence below where we needed to be to have our 7.5%.
So you're saying we haven't had the 7.5% reserve met since October of 2014?
Yes.
Okay. So as we started 15-16, we had how much of reserve, period?
$4,991,025. Mr. President.
How much did we have in reserve at the beginning of 15-16? And the answer is $4,991,025?
Yes.
Okay. Now, walk me through this map again.
On the first page,
Yeah, because when I'm trying to follow, actually really the last page, where you talk about the preliminary estimates is subject to change and the following items have a negative impact on fund balance by the end of the fiscal year.
Mhm.
So we've got another 1.8 million in insurance, right?
Yes, $1,841,912.
All right. And is this a different insurance item than what we discussed in February, or is this more insurance money?
This is more. If you recall, when we came back in February, the 14-15 insurance fund was under budgeted. And on the memorandum that I gave you all, I addressed that we would be coming back for the 15-16 because we found that it was not budgeted properly either.
All right, so this is $1.8 million additional for 15-16. So,
Now, what you approved before was that we were able to close out 14-15's insurance shortfall.
okay. All right, so we got 1.8 million for insurance plus a minimum of 750,000 for police plus 98,000 for, what is that?
That was for the demolition in community improvement.
Okay. All right, then 272,000 additional for J-Tran.
Yes.
All right, so the sum of those four things is $2,962,322, right?
Did you get the 344,000 where we had adjusted our revenues down? Well, we made adjustments up and down based on what we saw that has come in and what we project to come in through the end of the year, and the net of that was the 344,000.
Okay, so we're thinking revenues are going to go down by 344.
Well, that was the net effect. Some areas. Mhm. Yeah.
Overall 344 from what we budgeted. So
Yes.
2,962,000.
And are you adding in the things that I knew for sure above those things?
Do you have a sum for all those things?
I don't.
Because here's my concern. Because if we add up all of those things, it seems as though we're now less or getting right up against 4,991,000.
Okay, so once we take into account the items that I have that we project will hit FY 15-16, for 15-16, based on $113 million revenue budget, the 7.5% amount that we should have for 15-16 is $8,535,714. Once we make those deductions, that leaves us with $1,385,670.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that number?
$1,385,670.
All right, and had you already taken out that 907,627?
Yes. We've deducted everything on that I have under that fund balance FY 15-16 header.
All right, in the math you just provided, did you already factor in your recommendation to discontinue the youth employment and summer enrichment programs?
No.
Okay. So if you talk, so let me, all right, so at the end of the day, we have $1,385,670 in reserve based on your current projections.
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Foote.
Thank you. I got a couple of questions. Going to the budget, this budget document gave us a big budget. First page, it's got up in the top line, general property taxes. And then the budget, first number there, budget being what we're budgeting for. For budgeting, it says $57,196,174.
Yes.
Can you tell me the source of that number? where'd we get that 57,196,174?
That's the property taxes that we receive from our residents,
Well, I realize that's what it is, but who gave you that? Where did,
from Hines County.
so the county gave us this number, so they've got the property values and they're sending out the invoices to the residents.
Yes.
So they're expecting us to get 57 million. So that's an outside source that's providing us that number.
Well,
Outside being the county, right?
Well, the city, every year we go over and we kind of
Okay.
sit down with them, and, you know, get as close to this number as we can when we're doing the projection for our revenue budget. So we have continuous discussions with them to
Okay.
kind of to make sure that we're not over.
That's fine. I just want to make sure that, I find comfort in the fact that that's an outside source. That's not a number we're just estimating that based on last year we did this, we're going to do this.
No.
So somebody actually has the numbers of property taxes that they're sending out.
Yeah, we go over and meet with them every
So
year.
when you look at that, so far we've received 44,514,000.
Right.
Which is 77%. And so we have an uncollected money we're still expecting of another 12,682,000. Now, if you look at last year, the prior year to date, at this point, we'd only received 40,695,000. And at that point, according to the sheet, we had an uncollected balance of 10,054,000. So if I'm looking at this reading this correctly, last year, we were supposed to receive $50,750,000. And this year, we're supposed to receive $57,196,000. So that's an increase of $6.5 million in property tax. Is that correct?
Yes.
Well, that's really good. That's about an 8% increase that we should receive in property tax revenue if we just make sure we make all the collections.
The real estate folks are reporting that there's been an increase in the amount of valuation for homes that are $100,000 or above, and that's been since the end of 2014.
Okay, that's good. So then this number includes both commercial and residential property taxes, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So that's really good news. That gets lost in the problems we've got, but maybe that's a sign that there's a way out of this. Okay. License and permits. Is this where car tags come in?
Yes. If you look at the documents that I had.
Well, let's just stick to one sheet right now for the purposes of both my understanding and the audience. So the car tags comes up in the licenses and permits, is that correct?
If he wants to know what's in license permits, I can.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll go over there. It was just a question so motor vehicles, so car tag shows up in general property tax.
Yes, you're,
Okay, all right,
if you look up at ad valorem, well, you're not.
Okay,
Ad
that answered
valorem
my
taxes
question.
falls under your general property taxes.
Okay, so this 57 million is where the car tags show in. Okay, so if I go to the bottom line here, if I look at the budget, and this of course is what we're expecting for this year, shows up as 118,561,000. And so last year, the general budget number, if I add the prior year actual revenue and uncollected shows up as you get 68.5 million and 45.5 million. I end up with, I believe, 114 million, right? Is that correct?
Now, be mindful, it's not showing the prior year budget. It's only showing prior year actuals and the uncollected balance.
Wouldn't that add up to the budget? I'm not using the applied fund balance. I'm not using the applied fund balance. Wouldn't the last year's budget, if you looked at
You're adding the 68 million and the 45 million?
yeah, what's that? That comes up to what, 100, doesn't that come to 114 million?
Yes.
So from a standpoint of money we're expecting in, I mean, the key thing here is we can get bogged down in a lot of this stuff, but to me, the important thing is we got to make sure we've got revenue that we can count on coming in. And then we just got to right-size the city government to meet the revenue number. We do not need to be out there trying to put up extra parking meters to meet this budget, because there's not enough parking meters in Mississippi to meet this budget.
Like, I also say where the city collects revenue, we need to put more resources in those areas because, just say municipal court, they are probably one of our biggest revenue generators, but we have staffing issues there where we can't maintain the staff. That's a pretty stressful place to be over there. I'm not sure if you've ever been over there, but it's very stressful. And in my opinion, we don't put enough resources there where that is our key moneymaker.
Well, let me beg to differ with you a little bit. I think we need to look at the city government. We do have enterprises, but those are outside the general fund. Those are water and sewer and everything, and that's a different sort of situation. But in this case, for the general fund, it's really a passive source of income. We need to look at it as a passive source of income, where we get property taxes, and we get car tags, and we get some money from the state. And then what we have to do for the services we deliver, we've got to make sure that we right-size the services and focus on the must-have services rather than the nice-to-have services, and make sure they fit inside that budget. That's really what I think this exercise is all about.
Councilman, that's what we're saying in those recommendations, that we've got to look at the core services that we provide and make decisions from there.
Councilman,
Thank you.
you had a question?
Yes.